Welcome to That's What I Call Marketing the Singles, and I am joined by Michael Corcoran. I wanted to get you on today to talk about everything that happened yesterday relating to Meta, of course, with Zuck. Now, I did suggest we should both wear black t-shirts and chains, but neither of us had owned any. Talking about the big changes that were announced yesterday, some of the biggest changes we've seen from the Meta platform in a number of years. If anyone's missed it or managed to miss it, can you give us just a brief kind of overview of what was announced yesterday?
So in the words of the Lord and Almighty, not Mark Zuckerberg, Stephen Bartlett, it's a bit of a cultural tipping point that this is. And I'm citing in for a reason, because I think a post he put out yesterday was quite interesting, fair, but I'd love a bit of a clap back at him too, because I love going at poor old Stevens. Mark Zuckerberg has come out with an announcement that he is taking on board some information from the people who use the platforms, i.e. Donald Trump and Elon Musk. And he is starting to make some policy changes. And a lot of this is clearly political. It was a line that he used in his statement, and you better believe it's political. It's political because potentially he is a CEO of a big billion-dollar business that needs to play friendly with these boys or risk getting into a lot of trouble in the future. But he broke out 5 interesting updates to the free speech and safety policies that are on the platforms. I know, well, in no particular order, one of them was built upon community notes. So Meta used to, and still has in Europe, thank God, has got fact-checking policies in place where people moderate and look at information that tinfoil hat people put on the internet and stop it getting traction if it is untrue or it is not right. He is aiming to bring in what's called community notes. And community notes, some people might be familiar with in the world of X that was introduced at the end of last year, to allow the people to help moderate and make clear what is real and what is not in the world. I'm not entirely against something like that, but it comes with its problems, and it does need extra layers to protect. The second then was about simplifying policies. So again, the policies on X and Meta, if you make any sort of an error, there's a high chance your comments get deleted or your post gets blocked and your account gets suspended quite quickly. And they have been for...
They've done a lot, haven't they?
Yeah, they've done a lot, and it's very hard to get it back to. And it has been, I guess, since the Cambridge Analytical days, and Zuckerberg coming out and speaking about how the US media and the government asked him to suppress specific types of information. They started to do that. They followed suit. It sounds very much like he's doing the exact same thing, only different with this government. The next then was new policy enforcement, something I'm not against either, but improving and probably reducing the amount of sensitivity on some of the policies, meaning that people do have the ability to debate and have better conversation on the platforms, providing they come with receipts and facts. The last 2 then are about bringing back civic content. So they deprioritized political content on the platforms and made it a fun and entertaining space, which was a great thing for us when everything else...
To me?
Yeah, definitely. Especially with the shit show that's going on in the world. The last thing we need to be is more political and more polarizing and more against each other. But now they feel they want to bring that back, which is fair. And it's up to people what they consume. That's, I guess, the freedom of the platforms to an extent, but they do control the algorithm.
I made that point to somebody today online. I said, like, what they'll do now is, they're bringing this in and then they'll control the algorithm that lets that kind of debate fuel, like it'll be shown to more people and it's going to, create more of it. And will it just create more opposites? Will it create a bigger red, a bigger blue in the US context?
Look, and the use of the word free speech, both by Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, everyone who is pushing this agenda. Free speech is a cute word, but that isn't what billion-dollar people who own big publication houses like this are going to do. When you own those platforms, you influence what is put out there, and you can dial up and dial down. And this isn't anything new. Rupert Murdoch, shall we go on the list of Fox News? Left, right, upside down. It doesn't matter if you're in a tree upside down, whatever your political views are, whoever controls the narrative. And you need to be aware that that's happening, and this feels like it's happening again. Down to a few reasons, by keeping allies with the big almighty Donald Trump. The last one I think we'll just cite off, but it's not a big one. It's about moving the trust team to Texas. And it sounds great because they think California is too probably left and liberal and too restrictive and stuff. To me, it actually sounds like they're moving to Texas to save on tax more so than anything. So I think it's a nice one thrown in at the end just to make it sound we're fair. But to me, it sounds like a tax ploy more than anything. Take, for example, Joe Rogan and the likes of these guys all lived in LA, California, and these places for many, many years, and they all have moved to Texas. It's not because they're liberal views, it's because of tax.
One of the things in his video yesterday, I found it quite disturbing to watch. I was just like, this is someone who has such control now, making and moved control to things in the way that he wants. But towards the end of it, he said, we're going to miss some big things, some big mistakes, big things are going to fall through the cracks. But he wasn't saying we're going to fix that then. He was just like, that's going to happen. And that scared me.
It does. Like the line, I think, what was it? We will catch less bad stuff.
That's exactly what it was. Yeah.
What the hell does that mean?
What's the actual Zuck?
So does that mean that you are going to be okay with the spreading of misinformation and polarizing views and outrage and sensationalism, and we're going to get it wrong? But hey, it's all in the act of free speech. And that's where I kind of things like, again, I know I mentioned at the top of the conversation around the likes of, podcasts and new media and holding them to account. There seems to be, the second you have a new media and a new platform, it doesn't matter what you say. You're not fact checking. There's no integrity in the journalism. And there was a line somebody I saw on X use around the doctrine, which is, again, I am not a journalist by any means, so I may get this wrong. But there is an etiquette in journalism that you give the people the right of the reply before you go out with your statement. And it seems like he had a great time for the likes of Elon Musk and these people in the earlier days, but they're not doing this. And like, give you an example, Elon Musk tweeted 27 or more times in 24 hours about the conversation and topics that are happening within the UK right now. Yeah. There was one stage, I think he tweeted 7 times in an hour. With 7 different topics and 7 different conversations. Now, I know he's apparently this brain genius person and he might be consuming information and maybe it's his neural link working, who knows? But there's no way he is getting informed information, informed decisions. And that's a channel with profile, with growth. And that's the concern we're going to have here. If people with these platforms and this reach have the freedom to get things wrong and spread misinformation without receipts, without fact checking, and without, again, some sort of standard, this is where it gets scary. And look, we know what gets rewarded on social. Hell, I worked in Ryanair for a number of years. When we were sensationalism, we over dramatized things. We had creative license to drive a bit of outrage to a certain percentage of people who we knew we would offend. That's going to get more traction than anything else. And it's this outrage, which is the scary part, that is going to really probably misinform people. And there are people who will take headlines and use them as fact. And like it happens. It happens in red tabloids. It's nothing new, but to give people more license to do it with less protection, that's a scary thing.
And potentially, again, I'm probably really cynical about all of this because, I looked at it and I was like, this kind of scares me a bit. And I think you're a bit more balanced. You see some of the things that actually probably needs to be shifted. But I also think this all will come down to, yes, I agree, the billionaires club. I also think it comes down to money, revenue at the end of the day, because if he can get more people spending more time on the platforms, that's a metric he'd be able to happily report on and brands will pay.
Which I think is the thing that I don't get right now. Because what's happening is, this is in the US right now, just for clarity, it's not in the EU. I don't see it happening in the EU. The Digital Services Act is not probably going to let this come true. They had
problems with the EU, didn't he?
Pardon?
He had a nice pop at the EU. And
of course he did. And he did that too. And again, that sounds like, so there seems to be this tension between the EU and the US right now. And again, I'm not against that either. I would love the EU to separate themselves from the US more and us to actually do better things and prove we can do the right thing. But I just can't see it coming true in the EU right now. You're probably going to put up, red alert to brands who want to be safe and want to protect their brand safety on these platforms. There's a chance they're going to pull their money. So why, and you see this again, I know we talk about X, but X has had a huge influence in this. you have seen ad revenues absolutely tank on X off the back of what Elon is doing.
Yeah.
But again, people are so, well, he's a billionaire. He's just going to throw money at it, going to figure it out. Yeah, you're going to get more of a certain type of person coming onto that platform and increase use. But big term scale, Europe across the world, I don't see Australia picking up this either. They're being very strict on social media policies. They're banning kids under the age of 14 from having
Yeah. Yeah.
social media accounts. So
Hiking.
yeah, it's crazy. And so you are going to alienate yourself and polarize yourself from all of this potential revenue. It doesn't make sense to me. To me, it's like he is facing a lot of other issues from a certain person if he doesn't take this action. Now, again, I'm not against some of the things that are happening, but when these issues happen, does that mean you're going to reverse or change your policies again? The reporting protocol he briefly talked through, I think, manual reporting, is that going to be effective and fast? Like, are the policies going to be there for when shit happens
Yeah.
that things can be taken down? And if not, brands and people are going to have concerns because that's where they make their money.
Yeah. And that's going to be the interesting thing as this plays out, is what brands do. I mean, we saw, obviously, we saw with X, those big brand announcements, people coming off the platform. I don't know how many of them have gone back, right? But it's going to be interesting. And what I haven't seen yet today anyway, is any brands coming out and saying, we're not doing this.
They won't shoot the hip too soon, because they did it when the Cambridge Analytica issue happened. You saw people tread, and like, Meta didn't care about that, because one thing they need to understand is that, or most people, is the majority of ad revenue doesn't come from the big players. It comes from SMEs, and that's where a huge percent of their ad spend goes. So if this concerns and has causes issue with SMEs, that's where they're going to potentially see a hit. It's not going to be the big corporations. They don't really care about that. And they didn't at the time of Cambridge Analytica. It didn't frustrate them, and they eventually came back on the platform. So, it happened then. It happened with, again, the issues around the left side. Now it's the right. But the reasons, the removal of safety in a place where trust is at an all-time low, and there is so much negativity within the internet and the world, it just sounds like a crazy move to make. And again, I go back to it. I get it. I'm not against community notes if there's layers of policies. I'm not against policy changes. I would really respect, free speech and, two sides of a debate for people to make the most objective view, but we are easily influenced humans a lot of the time. And that's what's going to potentially happen here. And that's where I was going to get to the part with, like, the likes of, of Stephen, and like, his post I found really interesting, where he tried to talk through it. And like, basically Zuckerberg said fact checkers were too biased and the legacy media too political about censorship, which was potentially true, but that was the mandate that he gave after his last engagement with the previous government. He talked about we are entering a new era of social media called freedom of expression. And his thoughts, he kind of broke them down into like the sequence that might look at, censorship to reduce hate speech, misinformation, and harassment. Start with a noble goal. The scope expands. The definition of harm, silent dissent, legitimate debate. And this is the one I found interesting. So like, legitimate debate and different opinions are being suppressed too much on the internet. And I think that is a fair statement. I think, when it doesn't matter what side you're on, people are easily offended on the internet.
Yes.
And there is not almost like a gentleman's rule or a fairness over having different opinions. It's either I believe this and everybody else is wrong, and vice versa.
I do agree with that. I think that's a very, very fair point. Somebody said to me on a LinkedIn post today, was like, I'm offended by boy bands, but that doesn't mean you can't like them. And I think that's
exactly. And I think that's where it has gone wrong at the moment. But that's down to what has happened through polarization. My fear is it's probably going to make that gap even further.
That's my fear too. That is my fear too.
So the most rational and objective of people who go to these spaces looking for, okay, I want to hear Michael's view on this. I want to hear Con's view on this. And then I'm going to make the best informed decision on the two views and the facts and the information they portray. And then I'll make my decision.
Yeah.
And I might come to a decision where I think both of them are fucking bonkers, and I'm going to go back to my bunker in the back arse of nowhere and just farm sheep for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
And that's fine. But the fear is it's going to go to one way to the other, and it's actually going to remove the ability to be even more objective, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It does. Well, listen, we will watch this one unfold, and it's interesting.
It's approach with caution, I guess. And then look, a couple of things I think people might need to be, and just to leave on this, because
Yeah.
we're talking the word of social media. Obviously, we don't know what's going to unfold yet, but things you might need to consider now that he's telling you, you control the narrative and you control what people say on your accounts and platforms. I think important things you need to look at. You might need to think about relooking at going back to your house rules, because you now become the moderators of what happens on your platforms, and you will have a responsibility, even though Mark Zuckerberg and the rest of the platforms are taking their hands off, saying it's your baby now. Community management might be something you might have to look into investing more off the back of this, because that will take time and effort to try and maintain if you want to stay in these spaces. Call outs, more rigor on the creators you pick, the publications you use, the type of media publications and accounts you use. You're probably going to have to do more looking into those to make sure you're making the right choices from a brand safety point of view. And then lastly, when in doubt, get off the platforms and move to better spaces. YouTube, Snapchat, TikTok, for example, even though it's going to be banned in the US, is probably a hell of a lot more safer than what that could be right now. And even there's a growing trend right now, and it's not a big concern with Gen Alpha and the generations that are coming through, that they actually don't like these platforms anymore. They're dead to them. They're in gaming worlds, smaller community, niche groups. So if you're really looking to go forward and ignore all of this, pull your money and go somewhere else if you're too nervous.
And if you need to know who that is, go to We Are Frank. We Are Frankly.
That's the website, wearefrank.ly, or just look at me post memes about how crazy the marketing world is on LinkedIn.
Brilliant. Michael, thanks a million. Great to see you. And
you too. Appreciate it. Take care. Stay safe.
Well, thanks a million to Michael Corcoran for joining me for that episode of The Singles. I'm going to be doing more of these this year. Shorter episodes about hot topics that we all care about and that are really relevant to us in marketing. So if there's a hot topic you care about and would like to come on and do a session with me, let me know. Or if you want to hear about something, let me know and we will go find the experts in that field. That's it for this episode of That's What I Call Marketing, The Singles. If you did like it, do share it. And don't forget, our first full episode is coming out next Tuesday with the incredible brownie wafer from Diageo. So subscribe and stay tuned for that. Thanks a million.
If you would like to reach an engaged community of marketing leaders, get in touch with That's What I Call Marketing to discuss sponsorship opportunities.